Welcome into Bayou Bengals football. So the first thing I want to talk about is Jayden Daniels has the second best odds to win the Heisman Trophy. And I think this would really get me as excited as an LSU fan, because that shows that Vegas bettors, guys that are super smart, guys that don't really know what they're doing, guys that are sharks in the industry, are betting on the quarterback of a team that's going to be really good. So to me, as an LSU fan, I would be confident that, other people believe in what LSU has, talent, returning talent, and the quarterback, meaning they have a quarterback. Because what's the recipe for a Heisman Trophy? Really good quarterback, really good team, likely a team that wins a conference championship and gets to the playoff. So to me, that would get me excited. BetMGM has him at plus 900. FanDuel has him at plus 1,000. I think this is awesome for Jayden. I think this is really exciting for Jayden Daniels. This is a guy that's worked really hard. He's played a lot of college football. He's done an excellent job. Did an excellent job at Arizona State. Came into LSU. I think I was one that really questioned, was he going to win the job? They had they had Miles Brennan there. Miles Brennan, a guy that didn't really play a whole lot of great football, but was a leader, as Brian Kelly touched on, and he did do some nice things when he played. Also had some up and downs, but Jayden Daniels winning the starting job when a lot of people like myself kind of question, could he win games at LSU? But the LSU, I think this is a belief also in how strong the LSU offensive line. Like, I think Jayden Daniels, a lot of fans in the Reddit discussion group were talking Jayden Daniels, and some people made the point that, like, this is year two of an offense for Jayden Daniels. Does even if you don't believe in his high end talent, does him getting just more comfortable in this offense, does that give optimism for something? Does that mean can he just be a little bit more sharper? Can he be less hesitant to make throws? Can he be less hesitant to take off and run? I think the Purdue game, if LSU does something big this year, I think the Purdue game kind of is like a tone setter in like the turning of the corner. I think that game is kind of like foreshadowing of what's to come. The Purdue game, everything kind of came together. You saw Malik Neighbors. You saw Malik Neighbors have a really dominant game. You saw Malik Neighbors in the running for one of the top receivers. You see, as just a true junior, does Malik Neighbors take off? You saw, Maason Smith at that time. He was talking. I forget if he was with the team or not, but his rehab. He was kind of like embracing the adversity of the rehab around that time. And he's a guy that's hungry to get back, especially against Florida State when he got injured. So, and yeah, you saw the offensive line fully healthy, fully gelling. So to me, that might be a sign of things to come, and that might propel them to a great season. I know that actually. That's something that a lot of analysts press for a long time, that success in a bowl game can carry into the next year, which actually is not always the case, but I think sometimes it is, because I think it is in the case with LSU this year, but just because they have a core nucleus of guys like the offensive line, and they have high-end talent returning. So that's why I would give the edge towards that take, that it is like the ball moving in the right direction. The ball is moving forward. So, but yeah, the Purdue was just an absolute destruction. They controlled the line of scrimmage the whole game. I know LSU missing some guys. I know Purdue was missing some guys, but still, it wasn't like Purdue was missing so many guys that the game was 42-0. You saw that. A lot of times, the SEC Big Ten games and SEC versus other conferences are just lopsided because the SEC is such more dominant at the line of scrimmage. That was the case. Purdue was a tough, physical team that gave it their all. They're fairly well coached, but they were just overmatched at the line of scrimmage. Purdue could not get a pass rush. They were bringing 0 blitzes just to pressure. Nussmeier when he was in the game. So that's when you're really struggling. When you have to bring a 0 all-go blitz just to get some sort of a pass rush, just to get the quarterback to flush the pocket somewhat, that's when you're in trouble. And that game really unfolded that really game unfolded in a tough way for the Purdue Boilermakers, but in an outstanding victory for LSU. And Brian Kelly, touched on that they wanted to send the team out with a win. The neighbors, some of their players, did not want to go on a 3-game losing streak. And Brian Kelly, that was the first time in several years he had lost back-to-back games in November. And I keep forgetting the A&M game last year. That was kind of to me though, if I'm LSU, I would not beat myself up too bad about that loss, and I don't think Brian Kelly does, just because of the respect he has for SEC opponents. A&M was one of those teams where they were a 5-7 team that no one wants to play, meaning, they had so much talent and they've recruited so well that, and Jimbo Fisher's a proud coach and it's a fairly proud program. That's just a game where it was just a recipe, for an upset to, it was just a brewing upset waiting to happen, excuse me. So, but yeah, the next thing I want to talk about, what if Brian Kelly had won a national title at this point? So if you look at his record, he's 177-66. Undefeated season in 2012. Everything kind of came together for the most part. They had the Manti Te'o magic. A lot of plays went their way. He's only had 2 losing seasons, and he's won everywhere he goes, from Cincinnati to Grand Valley to Central Michigan to Notre Dame and LSU. And what I love about Brian Kelly? He's won with pressure. There's a lot of coaches. You saw Charlie Strong win at a lower level unfold at Texas. You saw Steve Sarkisian. Steve Sarkisian, have some success. Well, I guess that's not a good example. Lane Kiffin, he was a guy who, won at Florida Atlantic, and I guess can still win at the SEC level, but he just is not really, won big or won. He's yet to win a conference title at USC or Ole Miss, a Power 5 program. So Brian Kelly just, I think, is an example of, a coach who, has not won a national title, which is tough. But he's at Notre Dame where, it's national title or nothing. You play a national schedule. You have to recruit pretty much nationally. Even if you own the state of Indiana, that doesn't really say a whole lot. So, yeah, Brian Kelly, to me, is like, for coaches, I saw an article, ranking SEC coaches. To me, he's the third best behind Kirby Smart and Nick Saban in the SEC. But he is a guy that, you feel like with that national championship under his belt, you feel like he would be getting even more respect nationally. Like let's take like Brian Kelly and Jimbo Fisher. I would say Brian Kelly is a better coach than Jimbo Fisher, but Jimbo Fisher, after that national title, and maybe that's not the best example because he still does get some notoriety, but not quite a lot. But let's say, comparing them to Jimbo Fisher, if he's won that national title, it's not even really close. Jimbo Fisher, the reason Jimbo Fisher has an argument with Brian Kelly is because he's won a national title. But, yeah, I mean, Brian Kelly, though, winning big at Notre Dame and LSU, where the expectation each and every year is to, at Notre Dame, it's, national title or bust because you're not playing for a conference title. And then at LSU, win the division, first of all, the SEC West, which is really tough, which he did in year 1, and then win the SEC championship, which he was 1 game away from. So, and what I think was awesome about LSU this year is like they won some tough games where they were supposed to win. Like for example, the Arkansas Ole Miss game. Obviously, the A&M game was not the best example because that was a game they were supposed to win. But those are tough games, and you felt like as a coach in year 1, kind of trying to establish his identity, trying to establish his program. You feel like those were games he was destined to lose. Like at least Arkansas, Ole Miss, Auburn. You feel like he was destined to lose, 1 or 2 of those games. Mississippi State, I'll throw in, you feel like he was destined to probably lose at least 1 or 2 of those games. Like this had a feel Last year around this time, a lot of people were talking about maybe LSU is like a 6 or 7 win football team, and they just go and all they do is go out, win double-digit wins. Jayden Daniels really plays well in this offense. A guy that when he left Arizona State, you're kind of scratching your head like where does what not what is the future for Jayden Daniels? Is that when he left Arizona State. And myself, I guess I could fall under this category. When he left Arizona State, you could say that, maybe Jayden Daniels' career was on the brink of being over. Because let's say he loses the job to Miles Brennan. Does he get another opportunity at SEC school? I think look at the LSU roster. Brian Kelly was making a point with, the transfer portal, a guy like Denver Harris at cornerback who's a high recruit that it didn't work out at Texas A&M, and they sat him down, had meetings with him. For some of those guys that, have the high 4-star, 5-star pedigree, they will get another shot, but that next shot is likely their last shot. For Denver Harris, he's got to make the most of this opportunity at corner. And, the cornerback room, certainly interesting for LSU. You feel like Zy Alexander has got the edge from southeastern Louisiana there. Terrence Welch is the guy that they want to see more out of. Denver Harris, I think, is a guy that, he flashed a little bit in the spring game. I think you just, whether it's a work ethic thing, I think there's a little more meat on the bone as far as tapping into his full potential, whether that's, getting him to it could be a number of things, whether it's getting him to work harder, getting him in the weight room. It does look like a smaller guy out there. Can we pack on some muscle? Can we add some strength to his game? Will that help his overall play? Is he a guy that can help us on special teams? LSU, that's the big question. Are they going to improve special teams this year? They had the block field goal returned by Georgia, by Christopher Smith from Georgia. Now, obviously, that didn't cost them the game against Georgia. They still would have lost that game anyways, but when you're playing in big games like that, you can only afford so many of, you can only allow the other team to have so many of those plays. Not only in the SEC championship game, but when you are going through the gauntlet of the SEC, you can't even miss against Mississippi State and Arkansas. You can't afford a play like that. You give up a play like that against Arkansas, you lose. So hopefully special teams is cleaned up. When you listen to Brian Kelly interviews, that is a point of emphasis from this LSU team, is cleaning up special teams. But yeah, we'll go back to the Heisman odds for Jayden Daniels. So yeah, I think that shocked me. Quinn Ewers comes in number 3, Caleb Williams number 1. This surprised me still a little bit, but I would be interesting to see how many people are betting on LSU to win the national title. It was a few months ago, before I started this channel, LSU intrigued me, this year, because that seems to be a year 2 coach seems to be a popular bet to win a national championship. Like I remember Jim Harbaugh's second year at Michigan, Michigan was was the most popular bet in the offseason around like July, August, kind of around this time to win the national championship. For a while there, not as much so. It was more common for second-year coaches to win a national title, whether it's Pete Carroll at USC, Nick Saban in Alabama. I should know this. Talking to LSU, was it Les Miles? Les Miles. I think it was his third year, or was it his second year in LSU? I know, obviously, it was 2007. But yeah, for a while it was a popular trend of coaches winning the national title in the second year. And Brian Kelly, to me, why you could make that case is a lot of times it was a good program. Obviously an elite coach comes into a good program that's kind of stalled, but they have a good year 1 recruiting class, which Brian Kelly did. They brought in not only good year 1 recruiting class, but year 2 recruiting class. Like, look at guys like Sage Ryan, played a little bit this year. Harold Perkins is a freak of nature. So it's a combination of, good year 1 recruiting class, like Nick Saban in Alabama, like 08, Julio Jones, Marcel Darius, Mark Ingram was in that class. So Brian Kelly, comes into a program that, few years off a national title, got talent in place, good year one recruiting class. So he has all the ingredients there to be the year two team that takes off and wins the national title. So, yeah, Brian Kelly he's been asked about Maason Smith quite a bit. Maason Smith is going to have a huge impact on this team. Obviously, 2021 was very dominant. Former 5-star recruit coming out of high school. And, but yeah, Brian Kelly made the point that, they had exactly what they needed as far as edge rushers last year. Ali Gay, BJ Uzolari, Harold Perkins, they provided enough havoc off the edge. But the interior guy is when you see, that's when you see the edge rushers start to take off. That's when you see them get a lot more one-on-one opportunities. And that's exactly what Brian Kelly stressed in one of his interviews. You add a guy like Maason Smith, you're gonna have to double team, you're gonna have to chip, you're gonna have to do special. You're gonna have to keep an eye on this guy. Now with two guys like that, Maason Smith and Harold Perkins, like let's say Maason Smith lives up to, like he's not going to be Jalen Carter, but obviously not a lot of guys are. But let's say Maason Smith is as good as like a Christian Wilkins, some other guy, some of the other top elite tackles in college football from previous seasons. Let's say Maason Smith's that good, and then Harold Perkins is dominant once again. That is going to put a lot. When you have two guys like that, that just puts a ton of stress on an offense because when you're trying to worry about multiple guys, that is when you start to become less focused on just executing your play. When a running back is in the backfield, okay, where's Harold Perkins? Or when an offensive lineman or center, where's Maason Smith? Where's Maason Smith? Oh, we got to get two guys on him. Oh, look, that leaves a one-on-one for Deshaun Womack or a one-on-one for Savion Jones. And they're they win. The quarterback holds on to the ball too long because the coverage is good, and that's a one-on-one rep, and our guy better than your guy wins. Savion Jones wins the rep, or Deshaun Womack wins the rep, or Paris Shan wins the rep, and that's a sack. So yeah, Maason Smith, hopefully. You are just as an LSU fan, you are dying to see this guy healthy because he is just such a disruptor inside. I love his versatility to rush from the edge. This is a guy that is so strong and so strong in the upper body and just overall. He can control a guy with one hand and kind of control them, move them just to the side so he can read where the ball is going. He's very instinctive. Maason Smith, his impact is going to be tremendous for the LSU Tigers this year. Maason Smith, though, it had to be tough not playing this year, and he talked about going through the rehab, the adversity, said that he cried when the injury happened, but this is a guy that, usually a guy that's this fierce a competitor, that works this hard, usually they bounce back from injuries like this just because this guy, to get to this level of football and play at this high level and come from a 5-star pedigree, and work so hard to be the best, like he said, this guy can bounce back from something like this. Even though an ACL, it sucks, but it's an injury now where with modern advancements in technology, you can bounce back. And it sounds like he just, the rehab got hard, but he really just started to embrace the challenge of it. And it sounds like that was the kind of the turning of the corner for him to, really see what God wanted from him as far as getting through the adversity and getting back fully healthy and making an impact for this team. So I want to talk about some of the things from the spring game going back. Zaya Alexander, the corner of the transfer from Southeastern Louisiana, the corner. I think he's going to make a big impact. I think he's got a really good skill set. You definitely see the hands on full display when you watch this guy. You see a lot of ability in man-to-man coverage. He can turn around and make plays on the ball. Like I touched on, he's got the hands to come down with interceptions. And this guy was a force at Southeastern Louisiana last year. I know. To me, though, I kind of like these swings where you take a guy that was dominant at an FCS school. To me, this is kind of a better swing for the fence, if you will, as opposed to taking a guy that's just been solid at another program. Because usually if a guy's just solid or hasn't played much in another program, even if he comes from a high 4-star, 5-star pedigree, a lot of times he kind of is who he is. Maybe you get a little more out of him. Maybe he plays for you, he contributes. But this guy, I think Alexander, there is some upside. You saw in the spring game, he looked like he belonged out there, like his movement skills and the way he hit his back pedal. He looked like he belonged out there on the field for LSU. So I think this guy, even though he might not be like a difference maker for this team, I think he'll be a really solid player, kind of like Mekhi Gardner was last year for LSU. Kyron Lacy, transfer receiver from Louisiana, had a fairly solid year last year. Kyron Lacy, one of the popular breakout candidates for the LSU, not only for their offense, but for this team as a whole. Kyron Lacy, he's got a skill set that is really good. You see run after catch ability. You see he can make nice adjustments to the ball, one-handed catches, and he was a guy that kind of was a lot of the buzz of the spring game. So Kyron Lacy certainly a candidate for a breakout. Chris Hilton, like I touched on, I think he's got some upside. It was a little shaky in the spring game, but a lot of the reason why they were throwing to him is because he was getting open. So if you can get open, that is big. Obviously, catching the ball is the next step, but can you get open? If you can get open consistently, you're going to have a chance to make some big plays. And you saw in the bowl game, he had the 81-yard touchdown in the bowl game. I know they were down big in the 2021 bowl game, but you see, at least some big playability there. But yeah, so I want to go back. Jayden Daniels. Jayden Daniels, at Arizona State, I took his running ability for granted. You really see when he takes off and scrambles, it looks at times like I thought he was almost too casual to scramble, but that's just how fluid of an athlete he is. Excuse me. He's just so fluid an athlete. Taking off and running is almost like second nature for Jayden Daniels. So yeah, his change of direction, and when he like is running outside, when he wants to put his foot in the ground and burst upfield, you really see that ability. So Jayden Daniels, I really have underestimated his running ability. Now, can he take the next step as a passer? I think is the question, but I like the way he holds the ball high in the pocket. He's got a fairly fluid release. I wish it was a little quicker, but it is kind of like elongated. But overall, it is a fairly good throwing motion, and it looks like it's improved from when he was at Arizona State till now. We'll see if he can take another step in improving it this year. But yeah, you gotta like. If Jayden Daniels doesn't improve next year, if he just plays, kind of takes the skill set he had from this past year into this year, I feel like you would be happy with that. You feel like that could put you in a position to win the SEC title. But I think that ties into the conversation of his Heisman odds. Odds are, there's a high chance that he's going to improve this year. There is, like I said, everything is in place for him to improve. Year 2 in the offense, Brian Kelly has had a track record of doing a nice job with quarterbacks, especially quarterbacks who weren't not necessarily guys that had an NFL projection, kind of like Ian Book, for example. Ian Book was a guy, obviously, that was drafted. What he drafted with the Saints? I'm not sure if he's with the Saints now, but the point I'm trying to make is like Ian Book, a good college quarterback who really developed, I think, kind of maxed out his ability as a thrower, and he looked comfortable, making reads. To me, Jayden Daniels obviously is a better runner than Ian Book, but they're kind of similar in the sense that they are both guys that have enough throwing ability that in the right offense, as they get more and more comfortable, can have a lot of success and complete passes at a high percentage. I think Jayden Daniels, he's definitely his passing percentage will improve. But so I was talking. So it's interesting to listen to Brian Kelly interview, and he talks about recruiting the state of Louisiana, and the guy interviewing was like said, I think he kind of mentioned something about locking down the state of Louisiana, and Brian Kelly made a good point. Goes, you don't really lock down the state of Louisiana. You got Alabama's really good, Georgia's really good nearby. You got Texas. Texas hasn't been very good, but Texas can still, is right next door to Louisiana, and you got Texas A&M there. So, you can never really lock down the state of Louisiana. I guess you could. Les Miles probably did the best job of it before Alabama was really rolling. of doing so. But yeah, Brian Kelly just stressed the importance of knowing where guys are, and then at least knowing where those guys are. And then, even if a guy's like a high 4-star, but your recruiting, the LSU recruiting staff maybe doesn't have as high a grade on him, then you might want to, maybe look towards other guys. That's the thing. That goes with recruiting a lot. There are some 5-star guys that, you notice like Alabama doesn't offer them. Well, maybe that's not the best example. Some high 4-star guys where you don't see Alabama, Georgia offering them, schools that have a proven track record recruiting those guys. So it makes you wonder, if there's something missing about this kid. Is he more of a tweener? Does he have like a size profile that fits the Division I mold, but he's missing some movement skills, or his overall production hasn't been great? Yeah, to me though. Yeah, Brian Kelly, I think he's done a good job of recruiting in the state of Louisiana. Obviously, went into the state of Texas to get their highest overall recruit in Harold Perkins. But yeah, Brian Kelly, I don't think he never struck me at Notre Dame of, even though Notre Dame is in Indiana and winning the state of Indiana, obviously, is helpful. Indiana, not a powerhouse for high school football. Brian Kelly never struck me as a guy that's just going to lock in on one thing or lock in on one state as a recruiter. He seems like a guy that, knows how to make connections. He's a guy that's invested in recruiting. And at Notre Dame, he spent a lot of time traveling. Obviously, Notre Dame is a national brand, and they've been a national recruiter, so he has to be on the road traveling a lot. But to me, he doesn't strike me as a guy that, that was his emphasis to lock down the state of Louisiana. And no program, like even Ohio State now, you've seen as Cincinnati's got, no program really, completely locks down their own state. The one time it really happened was when Pete Carroll was at USC. You saw Pete Carroll owned obviously not the state of California, but he owned the Los Angeles area. And when he went outside of that area, he was getting a top player like a Brian Cushing or who else? There was a guy from Michigan, Dwayne Jarrett. Jarrett didn't pan out at USC, but that's beside the point. Pete Carroll, when he wanted to leave the state of California, he got who he wanted. Georgia kind of has been like that. Alabama a little bit's been like that. I guess that's the next step for Brian Kelly as a recruiter. We know where the guys in Louisiana are. We're not gonna lock down the state, but we're gonna get a lot of high end players. When we do leave the state, can we get guys that not only everyone else covets, but also guys that we have highly ranked on our board? So I think that is the next step for Brian Kelly, and I think a lot of that will come if they make the playoffs this year and/or win a national championship. A lot of that next step will come. I say next step because they're already doing a tremendous job. You see, top 5, top 10 classes, and that's to me LSU. LSU never. I'm trying to remember, have they brought in a top 3 class? They've recruited. To me, LSU is similar to Oklahoma. It's never like a top 3 to 5 class, but LSU, very well that they're going to finish in the top, 10 to 15 range, and they're going to hit on a lot of 4-stars. To me, like LSU, a lot of their top players, someone made this point, a lot of their top players have been like 3-star guys, 4-star guys that just, ended up being really good. They ended up really developing, like Justin Jefferson, Tyrann Mathieu. Some of their highest ranked players didn't really go on to have as much success. Like you think about, like Ruben Randall, for example. Ruben Randall was pretty good. I guess that's not the best example, because Ruben Randall was good at LSU, but he didn't really, develop, as far as, the NFL for the NFL. But yeah, LSU done a nice job of developing 3- and 4-star guys. And at one point under Les Miles, they were producing more NFL players than any other college football program. I think it is Alabama now, but that was a few years ago when like 2015, 2016 when Les Miles is there. So yeah, that was impressive. So let's talk Malik Neighbors. So Malik Neighbors, super explosive wide receiver. He's going to be a key playmaker. I've talked about Malik Neighbors on this channel a lot, and I've talked about him a lot on my other channel where I talk NFL draft. But Malik Neighbors reminds me a lot of Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers, if you don't know, was drafted in the first round by the Baltimore Ravens this past year, played at Boston College. Malik Neighbors is so explosive after the catch. And, to me, they both kind of got that identity as, just the slot receiver. Maybe they got a little run after the catch ability. To me, Malik Neighbors is like Flowers. I think he's a lot more. I think he's got a high upside. I think Malik Neighbors is going to be a guy that, as he has a really good season this year, he's just going to rise up draft boards. I think Malik Neighbors, to me, he's a guy where, he had the sophomore year where it's kind of like the preview of a really awesome movie, where it's like, what is, man, that looks awesome. And then you see the movie and it's awesome. And then you just, fall in love. Say it's John Wick. You fall in love with that series. To me, Malik Neighbors is like John Wick for me. You see it, or his year this year was like a preview of John Wick. That looks awesome. And then this junior year is just like where he explodes and you finally see the movies and you're like, wow, that's awesome. John Wick's awesome. Malik Neighbors is awesome. To me, that's what Malik Neighbors is. He's like an awesome movie preview. And then now this year, you're going to see the full awesome movie. And you're going to see Malik Neighbors just, be outstanding after the catch. He's got tremendous body control. I love his competitiveness. You saw even back at high school how competitive this guy was. His high school highlights were super fun to watch. He, you saw he's a guy that he is a true turn on the tape guy. You turn him on and you're just like, wow, this guy's something. I'm sure if I watched him in practice, he would be a guy that, say I knew nothing about LSU, or say I was just a casual fan and I knew nothing about football. If I went and watched him practice, I'd be like, wow, that guy moves differently. That guy looks better than a lot of receivers in college football, just from, watching him run a few routes and watching him catch a few balls. So another guy I want to talk about, Greg Penn. So Greg Penn is projected to be their backup linebacker. Omar Spates, Harold Perkins are projected to be their starting linebackers this year. But Greg Penn was a high recruit coming out of high school. And when you watch his high school tape, which I had to because he hasn't really played a whole lot for me to evaluate his play at LSU, and Brian Kelly actually said something about how he liked the way he performed in the spring. But if you watch Greg Penn in high school, you see ability to read plays, excellent side-to-side movement that helped him work through traffic. But what you're lacking from Greg Penn's game is ability to take on, engage blockers, be strong at the point of attack, and get off of blockers. So to me, that's something I always look for at a linebacker. Now, do you have to be like good, great, or elite at it to have success at the college level? No, but you have to be at least solid at it. And to me, I did not see that ability on tape. So I think that's what's holding Greg Penn back from being a starting linebacker at LSU. Now, Greg Penn, is he a good guy to have as a backup and for depth? Absolutely. I think, with his movement skills, hopefully they utilize him on special teams this year. I can't remember if he did play on special teams this year, but to me, that's going to be a guy that you got to have on special teams, whether it's punt, kickoff. This is a guy that his movement skills are too rare for him to not get on the field in some way. But I think Brian Kelly sees a lot of potential. He also's got ability to rush the passer. I think Brian Kelly sees a lot of ability in this guy, and I think he's going to try to, get him on the field, whether that means, subbing him out for getting him snaps if they're leading comfortably in a game for Omar Spates, or getting him snaps when Perkins is tired. Say Perkins is, you have Perkins rushing the passer several plays in a row, and you want to give him a breather. I think that's what you use Greg Penn for. But yeah, let's talk Jordan Jefferson too, the defensive tackle. So Jordan Jefferson's going to be a transfer defensive tackle, nose tackle from West Virginia. I like his upper body strength, like I've touched on. I think he's good against the run. I think he's strong at the point of attack. When offensive linemen are blocking down, that's when he has enough burst to beat him. So yeah, Jordan Jefferson, I think he's going to provide some good depth. I think he'll make an impact. Actually, if you look at the numbers were pretty impressive last year for Jefferson. 9 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, 3.5 sacks. Now, he does get pushed back a little too much for my liking when he does get double teamed. That was a concern about him. But yeah, Jefferson, he is a solid football player, and he has good size. So I don't know. I'm excited. I'll be interesting to see how he performs this season for LSU. J.K. Johnson was another transfer corner. So yeah, I mean the secondary. I'll say this: some people say it's not very talented. I think it's interesting because you got to feel like one guy's going to break out. And that brings me to Javian Toviano. So Toviano is he's a really good player. Former high 4-star safety recruit that LSU brings in this year. You saw him playing in the spring game. He's a guy that he's got real excellent stop and start ability, and his long speed is outstanding. And I saw him play. He was listed as a safety, some sites corner, but I think he can play either safety or corner. And this is a guy, he reads plays so quickly and can read the quarterback. And he's a guy that can just sit in zone coverage and make plays on the ball. So Toviano, this is a guy that has a skill set where you got to believe he's going to find a way on the field, whether that is at safety, whether that's at corner. You got to think that there's going to be some high-end level play when this guy sees hopefully when this guy sees the field this year. But yeah, Toviano, I mean, he blew me away. I mean, they played him at running back like a lot of good programs do. A guy that's primarily a defensive player. You want to get him the ball, on offense. So yeah, he blew me away with some of his speed. So yeah, he's an exciting player and a true freshman that hopefully will make an impact. And then it's interesting. Listen to Brian Kelly being interviewed. I think he's a straight shooter. Obviously, he's a guy that doesn't want to ever give too much away. But he's been doing this for a long time, so he knows what to say at press conferences. But I like that he's pretty honest about a lot of things, and I think he answers questions in a very a detailed, interesting manner. But yeah, he is. He, like I touched on, he is concerned about the depth of this team this year. And, I think I like that when they interviewed Brian Kelly, he was happy with the way this season. I like that he was, somewhat content with the way this season went and how they ended against Purdue because, I think there's some coaches that sometimes it can be a little too pessimistic. Like say they would have, after that Purdue game, he could have been like, yeah, we still got to get better. He was happy for his players. He knows that, LSU is superior talent-wise to Purdue. Maybe not as much as not as, the scoreboard probably not as indicative of, LSU maybe not as superior talent-wise as the scoreboard indicated, but Purdue still a tough, tough physical, fairly well coached program, and LSU just beat the brakes off them. So to me, I think that was cool that Brian Kelly was happy, and even though after they lost the Georgia game in the SEC, they lost the SEC title game to Georgia. Brian Kelly was still happy with a lot of what they had accomplished this year. So I think that's cool. He obviously understands the gauntlet of the SEC, but I think as a good coach, I think sometimes it's important to embrace what you've accomplished, and I think Nick Saban, I think, is kind of deemed a guy that doesn't, is just only satisfied, when they do win it all. I don't know if that's necessarily true. I think Nick Saban is proud of his team in moments when they lose. If you remember when Alabama lost the national title to Clemson in 2016, they lost the heartbreaking thriller, Deshaun Watson to Renfro, one of the last plays. Nick Saban was happy for his team, and a lot of those seniors, guys that were going to declare for the NFL draft, he understood what they had accomplished. I think back to the point, Brian Kelly, he's proud of what his team did. It's year one, upsets are going to happen, especially when you're running through a gauntlet. You got a Texas A&M team that's underachieved. They're pissed off. A lot of, they can build a lot of, they can build confidence, and they can actually take pride in spoiling LSU's season. Obviously, they were still going to the SEC title game anyways, but they spoiled LSU's chance, any hopes of getting to the college football playoff. So I think you can take pride in that. that's tough when you're in a position where you're already going somewhere and you got a team that's just wants to spoil your season. But yeah, I'm gonna wrap with that. Thanks for tuning in this episode of Bayou Bengals Football. Make sure to stay tuned for more episodes and clips from the show. Till next time, peace.